In Frederick County, Maryland, over 160 years ago, a man had a vision of a building for the future. He was not only creating a physical building, but this man was building for the future dreams and aspirations of all who entered its doors. This building still stands firm today and still changes lives. This man's vision would become known as Winchester Hall. The story of Winchester Hall begins in Connecticut in 1805 with the birth of Hiram Winchester. Winchester grew up in the New England area and became a school teacher. In 1838, at the age of 33, Hiram Winchester decided to move south to Frederick, Maryland to establish a school for girls.
At that time, there wasn't a lot of schools for girls or for boys, for that matter, and at that time a lot of people were opening small schools where people would pay to send their children to take classes.
Winchester started a small private school on East Patrick Street and later moved the school to North Market Street.
Through his efforts, though, with the Reformed Church, the Frederick Female Seminary came about, and it was established by an act of the Maryland legislature on March 10, 1840.
The schoolhouse on North Market Street quickly began filling with both local and out-of-state students, so Winchester began planning a building for the future. The construction of this building relied on funding from other sources. The state of Maryland set up the first of 3 lotteries to help raise money for the school. Historian Heidi Campbell-Schoaf explains the former state lottery system.
The lottery system is a little different than what we have today. Our lottery is run by the state and goes to a statewide pot. Lotteries in the 19th century were run basically for specific projects. For example, when they built St. John's Catholic Church, they held a lottery. The people they got permission from the state to hold a lottery. And then people would buy lottery tickets and then would get a payout. Sometimes it was sort of like a 50-50 raffle we would be familiar with, but there was some sort of portion of cash paid out to them. But overall, it was the goal to raise money. And that was what happened with Winchester Hall. And the tickets were sold locally, so that means that the people who were buying it were interested in the project.
With the support of the state and the local community, along with $20,000 raised from the first lottery, construction began on the new school building, with the cornerstone being laid in 1843. Hiram Winchester played a large role in the design of the new school.
He designed the building. The building is Greek Revival in architecture, which means that it resembles Greek temples, which was very popular in the 1830s and 40s for architecture in general. And that's why you see the big white pillars and the designs on the front, and the gable, which is the pointed roof facing the street. Houses were being built that way, and also churches and other buildings. And it was very popular in New England, and he probably saw many examples before he came to Frederick. Also, Greek temples were also associated with education. The Greeks were learned peoples, so a building that looked like a Greek temple would be an attractive school building. So he came up with that design, and he oversaw the construction of the building.
As the construction of the building continued, it became obvious that the original funds would prove to be inadequate, so a second lottery was held by the state. This lottery raised $30,000, including $20,000 for construction and $10,000 for an endowment fund.
The endowment was investment of that amount to fund future projects at the school, buildings, scholarships, other programs that they might run.
When the original building was completed in 1845, it was about 50 feet across and 90 feet deep. The building was 3 stories, containing in all about 40 apartments, and accommodated about 75 to 80 boarders. These boarders were not just local children.
It was popular at the time for children of upper-class families to be sent to other states to be educated, whether it was because a relative had gone previously to the school, or they thought the school offered a particular type of education that wasn't offered locally. So there were students that were coming from Pennsylvania, from Virginia, from North Carolina, Delaware, from all over. But by and large, the students at the school would have been what we would call middle class, children of professional people, not the children of the average working person, because the tuition was about $200 a year, and that was quite a significant sum of money.
With so many students attending the school, Hiram Winchester began plans for a second building. A third lottery was set up and raised $50,000 for the construction of what would become known as West Hall. Construction on this wing was completed in 1857.
This is a copy also of the East Wing. So you have two side-by-side Greek Revival buildings with the porticos on the front, the Ionic columns, and originally the roof line had more decoration. The architectural friezes are in place. There have been alterations to both buildings, but all in all, essentially what you see from the outside is pretty much what the students in 1840 saw when they looked at the building.
The East and West Halls were linked by a corridor, and it became natural for the students to term these buildings the Siamese Twins. While on the outside the two buildings were nearly identical, the new West Hall offered some new amenities.
What's interesting about the west part is that when it opened in 1857, Winchester advertised that it had a bathroom in the basement. And at that time, bathrooms were for baths. They didn't have, a toilet or facilities. Those were still most often outside, in outhouses and things like that. But the bathroom offered girls an opportunity to bathe, as he said, as often as they wished in pure mountain spring water, which could be heated. They could take a shower or a plunge bath into the water. So that was a pretty unique aspect of the facility.
The Frederick Female Seminary would flourish for the next 4 to 5 years. However, the dark days of war soon loomed over the county with the start of the Civil War in 1861. During the war, the Union Army would create hospitals out of churches, schools, and large buildings. Winchester Hall would now serve its community and country in an all-new way.
Winchester Hall was part of General Hospital Number 4. After the battles of South Mountain and Antietam, there were 7 general hospitals set up in Frederick. And General Hospital 4 was Winchester Hall, the Lutheran Church, and the Methodist Episcopal Church, all on East Church Street.
Winchester Hall officially became occupied by the Union Army on September 17, 1862. However, the school did not close right away.
When it was originally taken over for hospital use, they had the soldiers in the West Wing, and they tried to keep the classes going in the East Wing. Unfortunately, it being a school for young women was a little distracting to both the students and the patients, so it was the school was quickly closed down after the patients moved in. In all of General Hospital 4, there were 920 total patients the whole time it was open. Most of them were surgical cases. Either they had been operated on, amputations at field hospitals, or they were being operated on in the hospitals themselves. A lot of times these men needed second operations, either for a hemorrhage or they got gangrene. So most of the patients were surgical cases.
Hiram Winchester tried his best to save his school.
Winchester himself kept asking the government to please release his building. He wanted to salvage at least part of the school year. But unfortunately, there were 2 reasons they couldn't let it go early. First of all, there was an outbreak of hospital gangrene in General Hospital Number 1. And that's usually caused by overcrowding and unsanitary conditions, so they didn't want to pack more patients into those hospitals. The second reason is that the Lutheran and Methodist Episcopal churches hadn't been closed yet, and Winchester Hall's kitchens were being used as the kitchens for all of General Hospital 4. So poor Hiram Winchester had to wait until everything else was evacuated before he got his building back, and that was in January 1863.
Even after the soldiers left, Winchester had many other problems due to the results of the war.
As far as Winchester Hall, Hiram Winchester had a real problem getting his school back up and running. His building was badly damaged. He was given very little compensation for that. And the worst thing that he had to deal with was that a lot of the men and a lot of the families that had sent girls to his school decided that they did not want them to go back there so soon after the place had been used as a hospital.
The effects of the war took their toll on Winchester, who retired due to poor health. Hiram Winchester passed away on July 5, 1876, in Cambridge, Maryland. 17 years after his death, the alumni of the Frederick Female Seminary and former pupils of Professor Winchester presented the school with a marble tablet as a mark of affection for their first principal.
Hiram Winchester devoted his life to education of girls in our society at a time when girls couldn't vote, they couldn't own land, those kind of things. And yet Hiram Winchester thought girls had the right and the need to have a quality education. That's what he provided for them in Frederick.
The Frederick Female Seminary reopened in 1865 under the leadership of Thomas M. Cann. After the war, however, the school began having financial problems due to the fact that many of the seminary's Southern students did not return. The school leaders began to look for options.
In 1893, representatives from the Potomac Synod of the Reformed Church of the United States came to Frederick looking for a site for a school. They wanted to establish a girls' school and make their school that they were running in Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, all boys. So when they saw the facilities at the Winchester Hall, they thought that this would make a good site.
After the visit, the two schools began negotiations.
The seminary offered the Synod a 5-year lease on its buildings and grounds in return for the continuation of its original mission and purpose, the education of young women. The agreement was accepted by the Synod on May 12, 1893. Although sponsored by a church, the school remained an interdenominational Christian institution, and the seminary became a department of the Women's College of Frederick, Maryland. And the new president of that reorganized school was J.H. Apple.
On September 3, 1893, the first term began for the Women's College of Frederick. The opening enrollment was 112 students from 6 different states. The college had a faculty of about 14. Just like with the Frederick Female Seminary, the girls stayed in dormitory rooms.
After the establishment of the Women's College in the former seminary buildings, the students' rooms were furnished with a bed, a couch, dresser, tables, chairs, bookshelves, and they varied in size from 18 by 10 to 18 by 15. They had carpeting, wardrobe, large windows that are still in place around Winchester Hall, lit each room, and there was a transom above each doorway into the hall. So they were very well ventilated for their time. And there were sanitary bathrooms on each floor.
Besides being used as a dormitory, the east and west halls contained college offices, parlors, dining rooms, laboratories, classrooms, and a library. There was also a gymnasium for the girls to get their exercise.
The gymnasium was in the basement of West Hall, and it was 80 by 30 feet in length, and it was furnished with all of the usual equipment for exercise indoors. Dumbbells, ropes, climbing mechanisms, wands, fencing foils, Indian clubs, all of those things that are used in those days. There was also a vaulting horse, a horizontal bar, chest weights, that sort of thing. There was a piano to provide music to accompany exercises and recreation.
On days with nice weather, the students could also go outside for physical activity.
Today we see a rather substantial parking lot on the east side of the East Wing, and that was their ball field. And they had their athletic contests there.
The Women's College continued to grow under the leadership of J.H. Apple. In 1896, the college received a tremendous gift from a former student.
Margaret Scholl Hood, having been an 1849 graduate of the Frederick Female Seminary and having no children of her own, endowed the Women's College in 1896 with approximately $35,000, of which $10,000 was earmarked for a new campus. since the college was already overcrowded in the seminary buildings.
With money to spend, the Board of Trustees looked to expand the college campus.
In 1897, the Board of Trustees bought the property known as Groff Park in the western part of Frederick City on its western edges and began planning the future buildings of the college. So during the early 1900s, the college remained in the seminary buildings, while at the same time they were acquiring the land which is now the Hood College campus and beginning to erect their buildings.
The Women's College was getting more than just a new campus and buildings.
On May the 16th, 1913, in an order signed by Circuit Court Judge Glenn Worthington, Women's College of Frederick became known as Hood College in honor of Margaret Scholl Hood, who had endowed the college in the 1890s. She had died in January of that year and left the school some additional funds. But the college had decided in October of 1912 to change the name to Hood College in honor of Mrs. Hood, and she was so informed prior to her death in January. But it didn't officially become Hood College until May the 16th, 1913 with that order.
Classes started being held on the new Hood College campus in 1914. At this time, Winchester Hall became known as Hood Seminary, a preparatory school for the college. A few years later, the seminary ceased operations, and Winchester Hall became strictly a dormitory for college students during the 1920s. On August 1, 1930, the college leased the property to the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Education of Frederick County for 1 year at a rental price of $1,500. The college was no longer in need of space, but did need money for construction at the new campus, so a deal was made with Frederick County Government.
On August 1st, 1931, Winchester Hall was purchased by the Board of County Commissioners of Frederick County for $35,000. Various departments of the county government have been housed here. Some have moved on to other quarters, the Board of Education, the Health Department, among others.
Winchester Hall was not just for governmental use after the purchase. Private industry such as WFMD Radio occupied the building. Also, music lessons were given in the building. Former Frederick County Commissioner Terry Roderick recalls his childhood memories from Winchester Hall.
I can remember going to the lessons. You'd be in an individual classroom taking your lesson, but as you walked down the hall, you could hear other people practicing clarinet or drum or piano or whatever. And when I took the piano lessons, we actually would play our concerts or recitals in an auditorium here. I'm not sure what floor that was on, whether it was second or third, but that was a larger room that was specifically like an auditorium, a small auditorium, and they'd bring all the piano students in to play their recitals, a piece that you'd fret and sweat over for hours to play for about 30 seconds and then be done.
Winchester Hall has undergone several interior renovations over the years. Many of its spacious halls and rooms were divided into small offices.
It's been added on to several times. It's gone through several renovations and will without doubt go through several more. So you do have the history, but with older buildings you do have a structure that was not designed for air conditioning, obviously. It was not really designed for central heating, and so that you do have those inconveniences every now here and there where one room it's hard to heat in the wintertime, and the converse is it's hard to cool in the summer, and you have those rooms that it's hard to do either at any time. But when you stop back and think, certainly to me the historical aspects of Winchester Hall far outweigh any of those inconveniences.
The exterior of the building has basically remained untouched throughout the years.
Quite honestly, the county has done a pretty good job since 1931 of preserving the exterior of this building. They have allowed us to admire it. Structurally, it's still the same building. The rooms are different sizes, different configuration, but it's still a gorgeous old building.
Winchester Hall is still the seat of government for Frederick County. There are over 200 employees from 21 different departments and agencies working in the building. Currently, there are no plans to move the county government from Winchester Hall. The commissioners of Frederick County realize that Winchester Hall is the cornerstone for their plans of building for the future, for their family, friends, and neighbors in the county.
I think the county government for the foreseeable future will be headquartered here. We're constantly looking for space. We just recently purchased one of the buildings that is adjacent to Winchester Hall for some more office space for staff folks. But I think for the foreseeable future that the county commissioners will be in this building for a long time.
Despite all the changes in Frederick County since the construction of Winchester Hall in 1843, this building is still one of the real charms of Frederick. Many have walked its halls and through its doors, and many people will in the future. Yet this structure stands as a proud monument to all the past and present citizens of Frederick County. Winchester Hall is still a building for the future.